Robert was kneeling in the living room, his hands trembling as his father looked at him with pure disappointment. "You stole Tatiana's jewels," said Clayton, his voice as sharp as broken glass. The 11-year-old boy opened his mouth to deny it, but tears were already streaming down his face. "No, Dad, I swear it wasn't me," Robert whispered, his voice breaking on every syllable. But Clayton turned his back, unwilling to hear any more. The accusation echoed through the mansion like a doomed cry. "How could you do this to me?" Tatiana, his stepmother, asked, her tone that of the perfect victim. She held a police report, pointing to the jewels found in Robert's room. "He's a troubled child, always has been," she whispered to Clayton, placing a hand on his shoulder. Robert watched from a distance, his world collapsing in seconds. That night, nobody in the mansion slept. Robert cried alone in his room, understanding that his own father didn't believe him. The rejection was heavier than any physical punishment could ever be. He touched the old bruises on his arms, remembering every time Tatiana had hit him when Clayton wasn't home. "Why does she do this to me?" he asked himself between tears. On the other side of the mansion, in the kitchen, Joanna prepared her nightly tea with trembling hands. She had been the nanny for 8 years, having raised Robert since he was 3. She knew the boy's every breath, every fear, every secret of his small heart. "He didn't steal anything," Joanna murmured, pouring the hot water into the cup. Her eyes had seen too much not to recognize a perfect lie. Joanna climbed the stairs in absolute silence, carrying the tea for Robert. Upon entering the room, she found the boy huddled on the bed, as if trying to disappear. "Sweetheart," she whispered, sitting on the edge of the mattress. Robert clung to her, his small body trembling with raw despair. "I didn't steal anything, Joanna. You believe me, don't you?" he asked, with the kind of hope that breaks any heart. "I believe you," Joanna replied, kissing his forehead. "And I will prove your innocence, even if I have to risk everything." The boy buried his face in her chest, finally letting out all his pent-up anguish. Joanna held him tightly, feeling the weight of a promise she didn't know how to keep. But of one thing she was certain: Tatiana had lied, and she would find out how. As Robert slept in Joanna's arms, she watched his peaceful face for the first time in days. "You won't suffer anymore," she whispered, a fierce determination burning in her eyes. Joanna knew that Tatiana had made a gigantic mistake by making Robert suffer, because there was someone in that house who loved him more than her own safety, and that person was ready for war. It all started 5 years ago when Clayton met Tatiana at a corporate dinner. He had been a widower since Robert was only 3 years old. The boy's mother had died in a car accident, leaving a void that nothing seemed to fill. Clayton dove into his work, leaving Robert in the care of Joanna, who became the mother the boy needed. Then Tatiana arrived, with that perfect smile and a way of moving that hypnotized wealthy men. Clayton Croft was 54 years old, with graying hair and the tired eyes of a man who'd achieved everything except happiness. He was a successful businessman, owner of an import network that made him a millionaire. But money couldn't buy what he wanted most: a partner to share his life with. When Tatiana appeared, in her black silk dress and mysterious eyes, Clayton felt alive again. He didn't realize that those eyes were predatory, calculating, and void of any genuine feeling. Robert Croft was a shy, sensitive 11-year-old boy, too intelligent for his own emotional safety. He had spent his whole life with Joanna as his maternal figure, studying well, loving books, and dreaming of traveling the world. When Tatiana arrived at the mansion, something inside him screamed that this woman was dangerous. He tried to warn his father, but Clayton was blindly in love and wouldn't listen to his son's concerns. Robert quickly learned to stay silent because his father had chosen to believe a stranger over his own son. Joanna Scott was 42 years old, with brown hair streaked with white strands she never dyed, marks of a life lived intensely. She had been a widow since 35, the mother of 2 grown children who deeply admired her. She had worked as a nanny since she was 18, dedicating her life to caring for children who were not biologically hers. But Robert was different. She loved him as if he were her own, every fibre of her heart dedicated to protecting that boy. Her protective instinct was sharp as a knife, capable of detecting lies from miles away. Tatiana Reed was 39 years old, with a calculated beauty, a rehearsed smile, and a heart made of ice and pure greed. She had been married 3 times before Clayton, and each husband had ended up poorer after the divorces. 2 of them had died under suspicious circumstances, but no one investigated because she was too smart to leave obvious clues. Her goal was simple: marry, drain all the wealth, and disappear or stay to control the mansion like a queen. Robert was just an obstacle in her path, and obstacles exist to be removed. The modernist mansion was located in an upscale neighborhood in the city, surrounded by high walls and impeccable gardens. It had luxury rooms, a gourmet kitchen, a heated pool, and a library full of old books. But despite all the material beauty, the house had breathed tension ever since Tatiana arrived. Tatiana's room was forbidden to Robert, as were several rooms she had declared for adults only. Joanna, however, moved through every corner while cleaning, observing every detail Tatiana left behind. One day, weeks before the accusation, Joanna noticed something strange in Tatiana's room. An intricately carved wooden box was hidden behind the wardrobe mirror, a place no one would look by chance. Her heart pounded as she opened the box and found jewelry identical to what Tatiana always showed off at dinners. But these were different, lighter, with a finish that didn't look genuine. Joanna took photographs with her phone, her hands shaking with pure adrenaline. That night, Tatiana called the police and accused Robert of stealing her priceless jewels. The police found the jewels in Robert's room, exactly where Tatiana had planted them hours before. Clayton, devastated and his trust betrayed, immediately believed the stepmother. Robert was interrogated, humiliated, accused of a juvenile crime for a theft he hadn't committed. And Joanna watched it all, storing every detail in her memory, knowing she had the power to change everything. Joanna was cleaning Tatiana's room on a Tuesday afternoon when she heard the stepmother leave for the beauty salon. She had waited days for this opportunity, her heart racing as she entered the forbidden space. The wooden box was still there, behind the mirror, like a secret screaming to be revealed. Joanna took photos from every angle, her hands trembling as she documented every detail of the fake jewelry. "There," she whispered, putting her phone away. "Now I have proof." That night, Joanna tried to tell Clayton everything during dinner. "Sir, I need to talk to you about something important," she began, her voice firm but respectful. Clayton looked up from his plate, wearing that distant expression he had acquired since Tatiana arrived. "I found something in Tatiana's room that proves Robert is innocent," Joanna continued, taking a deep breath. But before she could finish, Clayton cut her off with a coldness that cut like glass. "You don't understand these things. You're just a nanny," he said, turning his attention back to his plate. The words landed like stones on Joanna's heart, and she felt her hopes collapse. "But sir, the jewels I found," she tried again, but Clayton raised his hand for silence. "Enough. I don't want to hear any more about it. Robert is delinquent and needs to learn the consequences of his actions." Joanna left the room in silence, understanding that she would need more than words to save that boy. She ran to Robert's room, finding him lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. "Sweetheart," Joanna whispered, sitting on the edge of the mattress, "I believe you." Robert turned to her, his eyes welling with tears he hadn't yet released. "Joanna, I'm scared," the boy confessed, his voice too small for such great suffering. Joanna hugged him, feeling every tremor of his body as she made a silent promise. I will prove your innocence. But Tatiana had already noticed that Joanna was investigating. During a formal dinner, the stepmother passed near the nanny and whispered something that chilled her blood. Nannies disappear easily. The threat was veiled, but crystal clear in its destructive intent. Joanna felt fear run down her spine, knowing she was now at war with a dangerous woman. But Robert was more important than her own fear, and that was all she needed to know. The days that followed were a race against an relentless clock. Robert received a letter from a boarding school. He was to leave in 1 week. Tatiana had manipulated Clayton into signing the papers, arguing that the boy needed professional discipline. Joanna needed to gather material evidence, not just her maternal intuition. She had only 7 days to stop the boy she loved from being torn from her life. Robert looked at Joanna with a hope that broke her heart to pieces. "You believe me, don't you?" the boy asked every night, as if needing constant reassurance. Joanna held his head against her chest, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. "With all my soul," she replied, with more conviction each time. "I will find out the truth, Robert, even if it's the last thing I do in this life." But what Tatiana didn't know was that Joanna had sent the photographs to a lawyer friend. He had begun investigating Tatiana's history over the last 2 days. The results were terrifying. 3 previous marriages, 2 husbands dead under questionable circumstances. The pattern was clear and predatory, the modus operandi of an experienced criminal. And now Clayton was just the next victim in a plan that would span decades. Robert was now being humiliated at school by the theft accusations that echoed through the hallways. "Thief," the other children whispered as he passed, their eyes filled with a cruel pity. His best friend, Luke, had pulled away after his parents forbade him from playing with a criminal. The boy was losing visible weight, eating only what was necessary, spending sleepless nights staring out the window. Tatiana watched it all from a distance, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of her cruel mouth. Then Joanna found documents that changed everything. While cleaning Clayton's office, she discovered files on Tatiana's previous marriages. The first husband, Richard, was a businessman who was ruined 2 years after marrying her. The second husband, Frederick, died suddenly in his sleep with an inconclusive diagnosis. The third husband, Bruce, had mysteriously disappeared after filing for divorce, never to be seen again. Each marriage followed the same pattern: initial wealth, progressive emotional control, isolation from family. Tatiana was a predator of wealthy men, and Clayton was just her next prey. Robert wasn't just an obstacle. He was the heir who would prevent her from completely controlling the fortune. Joanna printed everything: old documents, death records, unclosed police reports. Her heart pounded with the force of someone who had discovered a secret that could save or destroy lives. But the external obstacles continued to pile up like an avalanche. Clayton's mother, Mrs. Ursula, had been manipulated by Tatiana with expensive gifts and feigned attention. The grandmother now publicly supported the stepmother, saying Robert needed to be taught a lesson. The police continued to investigate only Robert, completely ignoring any suspicion of Tatiana. The juvenile judge had already issued the boarding school order, a paper Clayton had signed days ago. Joanna faced an internal conflict that tore her apart. Should I reveal everything and risk my job, my safety, my family? She asked herself in the dead of night. She had 2 adult children who depended on her financial support for their own families. Tatiana had made clear threats against her personal safety. Nannies disappear easily. But Robert, her Robert, was being emotionally destroyed, his childhood stolen by a lie. The house cook, Mary, had been her friend for years, a trustworthy woman who had worked with her from the beginning. But Mary had been seduced by Tatiana with promises of a salary increase and trips abroad. One afternoon, as they prepared lunch, Mary whispered something Joanna would never forget. "She knows you have pictures of her." Joanna's heart sank, realizing her cover had been blown. Tatiana planned to act first, to destroy Joanna completely. That night, Tatiana confronted Joanna in the kitchen, her eyes filled with a controlled fury. "You've been very busy investigating my life," she said, her sugary tone masking pure venom. Joanna didn't respond, just watched, calculating her next move. "If you say one word about those photos to anyone, your family will disappear from the face of the earth." The threat was so clear and so well articulated that Joanna understood Tatiana was capable of anything. But instead of backing down, Joanna made a decision that would change everything forever. She called a meeting inviting Clayton, Mrs. Ursula, her lawyer friend, and even the police to a family lunch. "I need to share something important with all of you," she told Clayton, with a calm she didn't feel. The businessman questioned it, but Joanna was firm. "It's about Robert. It's about the truth we all need to hear." Clayton agreed, never imagining his life was just hours away from falling apart. The mansion's dining room was full of people when Robert found the courage to speak for the first time. His father sat at the head of the table, Mrs. Ursula beside him, Joanna's lawyer observing every detail. Tatiana was confident, her eyes shining with the certainty that she completely controlled the situation. Then Robert stood up slowly, his legs trembling as everyone watched him in silence. "I have to tell the truth," the boy whispered, his voice small but determined. "I never stole anything," Robert said, tears streaming down his face as he pointed at Tatiana. "She's the one who planted the jewelry in my room to keep me away from Dad." The boy was breathing heavily, as if every word cost him all his emotional energy. "She hates me because I'm his son, and she wants to be alone with Dad and his money." Clayton turned white, his hand falling slowly to the table as he grasped the meaning of the words. "He's lying!" Tatiana shouted, rising abruptly from her chair. But Joanna was already placing the enlarged photographs on the table for everyone to see. The images clearly showed the fake jewelry hidden in Tatiana's room, behind the mirror. The lawyer presented the serial numbers that had been verified. The rings planted on Robert were recent forgeries. The genuine jewels, the ones matching the serial numbers, were in the wooden box in Tatiana's wardrobe. "This is absurd," Tatiana protested, her face turning red as her perfect composure shattered. "This nanny forged these photos. She wants to destroy me because she's in love with Clayton." Her screams echoed through the room, each word more desperate than the last. "Do you trust an employee over a respected woman, over your own wife?" But the lawyer's calm and the silent presence of the police only worsened her position exponentially. Then Robert removed his shirt, revealing old bruises on his arms and back. "She hits me when Dad isn't home," the boy confessed, his voice breaking as he spoke. "She said if I told, Dad would kick me out and never love me again." Every word was a blow that Clayton received in his own heart, realizing how badly he had failed his son. "I'm afraid of her, Dad. I'm so scared," Robert whispered as tears wet his childish face. Clayton's eyes filled with tears of pure remorse, a pain that no amount of wealth could compensate for. He rushed to hug Robert, holding his son as if he could protect him from all the evil in the world. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, my son. I should have believed you from the beginning," Clayton repeated between sobs. Mrs. Ursula was also crying, finally understanding the magnitude of Tatiana's betrayal. Robert clung to his father, finally being protected, finally being believed. Then the cook, Mary, entered the room, her expression showing remorse and courage. "I worked for Tatiana before I came here," Mary said, her voice trembling. "She does the same thing to every rich man she meets. She seduces, manipulates, isolates, and then steals everything she can." When I asked to leave, she threatened to ruin my entire career, Mary confessed, finally freeing herself from the silence. The video was played on the room's large screen, showing Tatiana recorded by Joanna. In it, the stepmother laughed as she told a friend about her perfect manipulation plan. "Did you see how he's suffering? He's finally leaving for boarding school, and I'll have Clayton all to myself," Tatiana said, with a cruelty that screamed from every pixel on the screen. "1 week, and that annoying child will be ancient history," she laughed, sipping her wine with absolute contempt. The police had called an emergency meeting with lawyers and competent authorities in Clayton's study. Everyone was gathered under the roof that had harbored so much emotional crime and predatory manipulation. Robert held Joanna's hand tightly, his small body trembling as he watched his stepmother finally being confronted. Clayton stood, his expression a mixture of fury and disappointment aimed entirely at Tatiana. The air in the room was thick, charged with the electricity of a truth finally being revealed. "You stole my son from me," Clayton said to Tatiana, his voice firm and filled with contained rage. Tatiana still tried to maintain her composure, crossing her arms with an arrogance that seemed almost comical now. "You have nothing on me that will hold up in court," she replied with that fake, calculating smile. "Robert is just a boy who wants attention. Everyone knows children lie to please their nannies." Her eyes scanned the room with contempt, as if she still believed she could get away with it. The lawyer then presented the material evidence that changed everything. "Ms. Reed, we have identified 3 previous marriages under false names and fraudulent documentation," he said. The photographs of the ex-husbands appeared on the screen. Richard, financially ruined, Frederick, dead under questionable circumstances. "We have opened an investigation into the deaths. The reports are being re-examined with suspicion of poisoning." Tatiana turned pale, understanding that her empire of lies was collapsing completely. "The jewels you accused Robert of stealing are forgeries," the lawyer continued. "The enlarged images showed the serial numbers, the differences in finishing, the forged maker's marks. The genuine jewels were found in your room, inside a hidden box, proof of matrimonial fraud." The lawyer's voice was calm, professional, relentless in its presentation of irrefutable facts. Tatiana tried to speak, but her words devolved into incoherent babbling. "I have recordings of you confessing your plans," Joanna said, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. She played the video again, every word from Tatiana damning her ever deeper. "Dad, she hit me every day," Robert said, pointing to the bruises still visible on his body. "She said she would kick me out if I told, and that you would never love me again." The boy's voice echoed with a truth that no lawyer could dispute. Mrs. Ursula stood up, her gaze filled with a fury that only a grandmother who understood she'd been manipulated could express. "You used my compassion and my love to hurt an innocent child," she said to Tatiana. "You betrayed my son's trust in a way no woman ever should." The police moved forward, their arrest warrants ready. Tatiana saw her future crumble as she made one last attempt to escape through the back door, but the police were already in position, blocking her escape route. "Tatiana Reed, you are under arrest on suspicion of matrimonial fraud, child abuse, and possible poisoning," the officer said. As they cuffed her, she screamed denials that echoed down the mansion's hallway. "You'll all regret this. He's ungrateful. This nanny manipulated all of you." But her words faded as she was placed in the police car, her face finally showing the void of an exposed criminal. Clayton ran to hug Robert again, holding his son as if he would never let him go. "You were so brave," he whispered, kissing the boy's forehead with a tenderness that had been neglected for months. "I will never doubt you again. I will never believe lies again." Robert cried, but they were tears of relief, of finally being protected by the one who should have protected him from the start. And in the background, Joanna watched it all with watery eyes, knowing she had done the right thing. Tatiana left the mansion under police escort, her expensive clothes, her fake jewelry, and her life of lies left behind. She would be tried for the crimes of matrimonial fraud, child abuse, and the suspected poisoning of her ex-husbands. Investigators opened new cases regarding Richard and Frederick, examining the forensic reports with fresh eyes and renewed suspicion. 2 autopsies were requested, and the preliminary results indicated poisoning by rare and hard-to-detect substances. Tatiana Reed would face a long prison sentence, with no possibility of parole anytime soon, her predation finally costing her. Joanna was publicly thanked by Clayton in a formal meeting with the entire family present. "You aren't just a nanny, you are this family's hero," Clayton said, his eyes wet with gratitude. He offered her a significant salary increase and a permanent position that could never be revoked. "You saved my son. You saved my family. You saved my life," he continued, hugging Joanna tightly. The entire community began to learn the story of the brave nanny who had unmasked a sophisticated criminal. Robert ran to Joanna every morning, with intense hugs and smiles that finally had meaning again. "You saved me. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did," the boy would say, his face radiating pure relief. The child began to eat normally, to sleep deeply, to smile genuinely for the first time in months. His grades at school improved dramatically, from failing marks to the top of his class. Robert had come back to life because one woman chose love over safety, sacrifice over comfort. Clayton began to look at Joanna completely differently after all this. Seeing how she hugged Robert with that unconditional love, how she comforted his fears and celebrated his small victories, he realized that true love didn't come from manipulation, fake beauty, or emotional control. It came from genuine sacrifice, unwavering loyalty, and protection that asked for nothing in return. One day, while watching Joanna laugh with Robert in the kitchen, Clayton understood that he had found his true home. 6 months later, Joanna was no longer an employee of the mansion, but part of Clayton's family. They married in a simple ceremony in the mansion's garden, surrounded by friends and family. Her 2 adult children were present, applauding as they watched their mother finally find the happiness she deserved. Robert stood beside them as the best man, with a smile that shone with genuine joy. The house that had been an emotional battlefield became a safe haven of true love. Robert now had 2 parents who loved him and a mother in Joanna who protected him with maternal ferocity. Joanna's adult children visited often, bringing their own children to meet the grandmother who had raised a hero. The mansion breathed peace for the first time in years, its hallways filled with genuine laughter. Robert kept a journal where he wrote his daily gratitude for having been saved, for having been believed. His best friend Luke had apologized and returned, seeing that Robert was innocent all along. The value of people wasn't in how much money they had or what car they drove. Robert learned that courage meant speaking the truth, even when the whole world was screaming false accusations. Clayton learned that true love cares, protects, and never manipulates or threatens. Joanna proved that an ordinary person without formal power or material wealth could change the fate of entire families. And the community learned that social justice was still possible when good people decided to act. What do you think? Did Tatiana get exactly what she deserved? Asks the narrator's voice. Do you believe Joanna did the right thing even while taking incredible risks? If you were in Joanna's place, would you have the courage to confront such a dangerous criminal? Leave your comment saying if you still believe in justice in this world. And share this story with those who need to hear that the truth always wins.